Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, Exploration of Harar. And that part, he says something that I found to be very surprising. It's about the food choices of the Somali people, and in particular, how it's so similar to the food choices of the Maasai people. I was actually very surprised, having grown among the Maasai myself and having seen how their attitude towards certain types of foods, and in particular flesh. I found this part describing what seemed to be like exactly the attitude of the Maasai towards some types of meat. And that surprised me, and I'm going to read that. Now, there are major differences between what the Somali eat and what the Somali ate and what the Maasai ate, because, of course, people have changed. This book was published in 1850s. So how people ate then must have changed, of course. Today, people eat different foods. The same case to the Maasai, that what they used to eat or what they used not to eat, many of them today eat. And I think it's the same case with the Somali. But now, even in their traditional way of eating, there are differences that we have to acknowledge first before I talk about the surprising similarities. And these similarities are in particular regarding their attitude, not even the choices themselves, even though the choices are the same, but the attitude is very, very, very same. Now, the Somalis are people who relied for the most part on flesh from camel, flesh and milk from camel. Those were their primary, or that was their primary source of food. Of course, them keeping camels is informed by the environment in which they lived. Of course, they also kept, or they still keep, of course, today, sheep and cattle. Of course, there is a breed of cattle that is from the Somali people, and I remember I was reading Sir Charles Eliot's book, where the East Africa Protectorate, where he was talking about the different breeds of animals that were found in East Africa. And he was explaining that the cattle from the Somali is the best breed in Eastern Africa. That breed of cattle was the best. It seemed to produce good maybe flesh and milk, and it was also very resistant to the environment. Of course, the Maasai cattle is also great, but seems like he preferred the Somali cattle for some reason. Now, coming back to this, so the Somali, for the most part, ate camel and drank camel milk. They still do, of course, especially in the rural. The Maasai didn't keep camels. It's not their thing. The Maasai keep cow, goat, sheep. That's all they keep. That's all that they rely on. But I understand that Somali kept cow, they kept sheep, goat, and camel. But of course, they also kept donkeys, horses, mules. The Maasai kept donkeys, no mules or horses. And I'm speaking when it comes to large scale. Of course, maybe there was that one Maasai who had horses, probably or probably not, or maybe some camel, maybe not. But now, when it comes to the meat, the Maasai are very specific. And I'm talking about a Maasai who still sticks to the traditions of the people. They don't eat anything outside goat, sheep, cow. They don't eat anything outside of that. So they'll eat sheep, goat, cow, milk, and blood from those animals. Nothing outside there. They don't eat birds. They don't eat fish. They don't eat wild animals. They don't touch all that. And here is the something that is very peculiar about them is their disgust for those other forms of proteins. They have so much disgust, for example, for chicken. Of course, the Maasai of today eat chicken, but if you found the old people in the villages, in the Manyatas, they wouldn't touch chicken. It's so disgusting to them. The fish is so disgusting to them. They don't like that. Now, reading this part of this book, I find the same attitude among the Somali of that time, of 1850s. And this is what the book says. They despise the excellent fish with which nature has so plentifully stocked in their seas. So despite the fact that the Somalis lived next to the sea and there was a lot of fish, they seemed to despise fish. And it's the same case to the Maasai, even though the Maasai didn't really live along or close to the sea, but of course they lived next to lakes and rivers. But the Maasai have so much disgust or dislike for fish. But of course, modern Maasai eat fish. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying traditionally they didn't. He continues to say, "Speak not to me with that mouth which eateth fish." That's what the Somali will say, that don't speak to me if you've eaten fish. It's kind of disgusting to them. He says that is a favorite insult among the Badawin. That was like an insult among the Bedouin. Now, I will ask those who are watching me, and you come from the Somali community, whether this attitude was among all Somalis, or this was an attitude of specific clans or groups of Somalis who had this, we can say, dislike or not liking fish. Is it across the board, or is it just specific? Because here he mentions particularly the Bedouin. He continues to say, if you touch a bird or a fowl of any description, you will be despised even by the starving beggar. So yeah, fowl, chicken, birds, they really they despise that as well as food. And even a beggar will just despise you if you happen to be someone who ate fowl or birds. Same case to the Maasai. I remember there was this old man, it was in the 90s, and he will come and find us eating chicken, and he will be so disgusted about it, and he will just walk out and go. Like he didn't want even to be in that environment of you eating chicken or eggs. I still remember he was a very nice old guy. He used to be so disgusted, and I still remember his facial expressions of how he will come. He was like, "What are you people eating? This is so disgusting." And even if he had come for a serious visit or some discussion, he'll just walk and go, and then he'll come back later when he knows that you people are done with that. So it seems like it's the same attitude here, that you eating fowl, chicken, of course, and birds was so disgusting to this, at least to this group of Somalis he interacted with. He continues to say, you must not eat marrow or the flesh about the sheep's thigh bone, especially when traveling. The kidneys are called a woman's dish. So even with the animals that were eaten, there were rules about them. And I think maybe there are still rules about them. And this is true to most African communities, that when it comes to flesh, there are specific rules even about the animals that are eaten, that there are specific parts, that these parts are for men, these parts are for women, these parts are for men who maybe have had sons who have been initiated, these parts are for young men. There are those rules. So it seems that there was something similar here. I would like to hear people who know more about this to tell us what that is exactly. It continues, none but the northern Somal will touch the hares which abound in the country, and many refuse the sand antelope and other kinds of game. So there are the Somals of the north. He says that they were the only ones who will touch hares. I don't know whether it means they will eat them, or it means that they will touch them and the rest of the Somalis didn't even want to touch them. I'm assuming maybe it means they will eat it, but the rest will not eat them. And the rest will not eat even antelopes. Now, the Maasais don't eat antelopes, they don't eat hares. And it is for that reason that if you look closely, you realize that most of the game parks in Kenya, the most popular ones, are found in the lands of the Maasai. And that's why I think one of the reasons is that the Maasai have had this habit of not eating wild animals. They are not interested in eating them. So because of that, the animals are in abundance. And if you don't eat zebras, you don't eat antelopes, you don't eat these animals, then of course the lions, the cheetahs, and the leopards also get food, and of course the population sustains itself. So, but if you go to other places, these animals have disappeared, and it's because the people hunt them for food. That's not the same case among the Maasai. But it seems like it was the same case among the Somali, that they did not hunt these animals. It wasn't part of what they consider to be source of food, and I found that to be interesting. He says, none but the northern Somal will touch the hares which abound in the country, and many refuse the sand, antelope, and other kinds of game, not asserting that the meat is unlawful, but simply alleging disgust. So he says they don't say that the meat is unlawful to eat, but they are just disgusted by it. And that's very interesting. It's not that there is a law, maybe religious law, that made them to be like they shouldn't eat. Maybe there is. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But seems like for some reason they were disgusted. For some reason they were disgusted about eating wild animals, just like the Maasai are disgusted by the idea or the concept of eating wild animals. So yeah, so that's a part that I found to be interesting, and it caught my attention because of my exposure to the Maasai disgust to some of these types of meat. And when I was reading that, the old man I mentioned came to mind. I could just visualize his disgust about him seeing us eating chicken or eggs, really disgusted him. And I found this to be interesting because of that. Those are my random thoughts.